This is New York, and this is the New York City subway. 600 miles of track, over 400 stations, and a daily ridership of more than 3 million people. It's one of the most impressive transit systems in the world. But once upon a time, it could have looked completely different. Trams crossing the entire city, elevated trains 30 feet in the air, plans to double the size of the entire subway, with lines running from Manhattan to Staten Island. This is the story of the plans for the city's transit that almost but never quite happened, stopped in their tracks, defeated in a decades-long battle for the New York City subway. In the early 1800s, the first permanent mass transit was pulled by horses along steel rails in the street. But the horse cars had problems. Animals got tired. They were unreliable. They couldn't unionize, but somehow you still had to feed them. They were an outdated technology. The city needed a replacement. Between 1825 and 1899, the Patent Office received a total of 125 plans for elevated transit systems. The first plan was the Arcade Railway. Keep the horses, but elevate them to a platform above the street while trains ran below. John Randall Jr., a 3-mile elevated track along Broadway. James Sweat, a steam-powered locomotive dangling passenger cars below. There was also Rufus Gilbert, an elevated train powered by steam pneumatics that launched cars from station to station. Almost all were for Broadway, the city's most congested street. But there was a problem. No one knew whether an elevated train would raise property values or lower them, so Broadway shopkeepers blocked any plan that could affect their property values. Only a master politician could truly tackle the congestion. Charles Harvey was the chief engineer on a successful project to link Lake Superior and Lake Huron. That gave him powerful political allies. Harvey also saw elevated transit as the solution to New York's congestion. But unlike the other inventors, Harvey stayed away from the landowners on Broadway. Instead, he wanted to build an elevated train line on Greenwich Street and 9th Avenue, far enough away to avoid the conflict, but close enough to make a difference. With his own money, he built a test track. If his plan failed, he'd tear it down. In 1867, he piloted a single car down a half-mile track, reaching a top speed of 10 miles per hour. Impressive. But it was pulled by a cable, and cables break. He had enough time to fix it, but competitors were coming. In 1863, after the first underground transit system in the world opened in London, Alfred Ely Beach was convinced the solution to traffic congestion wasn't above the street. It was under it. An engineer, his idea was to use compressed air propelled by a massive steam-powered fan to push cars through a cylindrical tube. But he had to build it in secret. New York was under the grip of the corrupt Tammany Hall and its boss, Boss Tweed, a businessman who used his political power to enrich himself and his associates. Tweed had deep ties to the horse car companies. Beach tried to get official permission to build his subway. Boss Tweed blocked him at every turn. So he hatched a plan. Instead of a subway, he asked for permission to build a pneumatic mail tube under Broadway. He leased a department store building, and from there he dug a tunnel, 312 feet long and 8 feet high. He used an innovative tunneling shield method to avoid attracting attention at the surface. If the street pavement cracked, it was over. They worked at night with hand tools. Materials were carted into the building using side streets. And finally, in 1870, he revealed his Beach Pneumatic Transit project, a fully functional subway. It was a success. So Beach proposed to extend it another 5 miles to Central Park. The permit was blocked again. Tweed had just gotten a charter for his own New York railway company, and he had plans to build his own elevated train in Manhattan. It was now underground versus overground. Beach threatened his monopoly, but so did Harvey. Harvey's railroad on Manhattan's west side was starting to take off. He fixed some of the technical setbacks, and his investors reorganized his company into the New York Elevated Railway Company. Instead of cables, the lines were switched to steam-powered locomotives. And it worked. Boss Tweed went to the state legislature with a bill to declare Harvey's train a public nuisance, seeking permission to tear it down. But Harvey had a card in his favor: powerful political allies. With their help, he managed to defeat Tweed's bill. In the same year, Tweed was brought down by a cartoonist named Thomas Nast. The cartoons prompted investigations that uncovered years of embezzlement, bribes, nepotism, and rigged elections. He was convicted of 102 separate crimes and sentenced to 12 years in prison. With Tweed out of the picture, it was now a race between Harvey's elevated train and Beach's subway. The fight of the century. Who was going to win? Underground subway or elevated steam engine? Financial crisis. Investors were nervous. Harvey's 9th Avenue L train had already proven the concept of elevated transit. Beach's pneumatic subway was still somewhat of an experiment. Investors stopped backing it. By the late 1800s, the L trains defeated the subway and were going to transform the city. Private rail companies built several elevated train lines in Manhattan to areas that were previously nothing more than farmland. It allowed people to live further away, but still benefit from the city. In only 5 years, hundreds of blocks of elevated track were built. Harlem, once a rural area with farms and country estates, was filled with row houses. In the Bronx, the 3rd Avenue L led to a 5-fold population increase in only 20 years. But the L trains weren't perfect. They were gigantic steam engines in the air. They pumped out toxic smoke, blocked out the sun, and were incredibly noisy. The tracks turned into boundaries. It was dangerous to walk under them at night because of the shady people who hung there. Hey, want to try out some remote access software? If you haven't heard of it, I use it all the time. I was in New York recently, which is actually when I thought of making this video. But I didn't bring my laptop because I thought, you know what? This is it. I can finally rely on other people to keep this ship running. But that turned out to be a complete mistake. So I had to use AnyDesk to get access to my home PC from my phone and then kick off the project. It allows me to stay really flexible so I don't feel stressed about not having access to all my files or hopping onto Blender. And I know that my data is secure thanks to their military-grade encryption. If you're an entrepreneur or often on the move or have a system where you're clearly the bottleneck, AnyDesk is definitely something to try out. Try it now for free at anydesk.com/hoch. But by the time all elevated lines were united under the Manhattan Railway Company in 1880, they were already overwhelmed by passenger demand, and the population continued to explode. It nearly tripled between 1880 and 1905. By 1910, Manhattan alone reached a peak population of 2.3 million people. Demand for commuter rail soared. Instead of vertical growth, real estate developers wanted horizontal expansion enabled by cheap mass transit. It was already a total revolution in how people lived, but another one was coming. In 1882, Thomas Edison opened the Pearl Street Power Station in Lower Manhattan, one of the first centralized electrical grids in the world. Brooklyn got its first electric streetcar in 1890, running from Park Circle to Coney Island. Then they looked under the elevated train lines and they saw the horse cars, and they were like, what are you still doing here? The trolleys were twice as fast, more reliable, and more efficient. The web of horse car lines electrified and expanded across the city. But while streetcars were good for local transit, they were still too slow for long distances. But they proved the viability of electric railway vehicles. And if they worked for trolleys, they could work for trains. The L lines were converted to electricity. No more toxic smoke. But without smoke, suddenly, it was much easier to justify building them underground. In 1898, New York's 5 boroughs consolidated. New York City's administrative area increased to 13 times its size. It became a global megacity, the second largest in the world. London had an electric underground system by 1890. Paris unveiled its metro at the 1900 Exposition. New York, now supposedly up there with the big dogs, was behind. Once the 5 boroughs were brought under one city government, the construction of an integrated regional transit network was justified. Construction on the subway began in 1900, and in just 4 years, 9 miles of track and 28 stops were completed. The Manhattan Main Line was publicly funded but privately operated by the Interborough Rapid Transit Company, or IRT. It ran from City Hall to Harlem, all for just 5 cents. But even before the first line was finished, people were demanding expansions. The initial planning for subway expansion was overseen by the Board of Rapid Transit Railroad Commissioners. In 1902, they asked Chief Engineer William Barclay Parsons to develop a general and far-reaching system of rapid transit covering the whole city of New York and all its 5 boroughs. His vision included expansions into Brooklyn, the Bronx, and Queens. In Manhattan, they planned multiple lines on the east side. By the time Parsons published his plan in 1906, the first subway line was already at capacity. By 1908, the subway averaged 800,000 passengers a day. The Rapid Transit Commission was dissolved. From then on, transit was overseen by the State Public Service Commission. No one thought the PSC could juggle both subway operation and all other public utilities. But the PSC wanted to prove them wrong. They came up with the Tri-Borough Plan, which had 3 main routes. It stretched from the tip of Manhattan to the Bronx. A subway that ran under 4th Avenue in Brooklyn. Lines branched off and ran to Bay Ridge, Coney Island, and other Brooklyn neighborhoods. The Tri-Borough Plan was important. Most of it was built. But then expansion stagnated. There were philosophical differences between New York's mayor and the PSC. Mayor Gaynor wanted to extend existing lines. PSC wanted a new independent system. The private railroad companies stagnated. With no political direction and no competition, the IRT and BRT had no incentive to expand their subway systems. That was until an outsider, William Gibbs, wanted to link the Tri-Borough routes with his own railroad system. With the new competition, the IRT and BRT were prompted to expand again. They signed a deal, the dual contracts, one with the IRT and one with the BRT, which led to a wave of subway expansion. The city built new subways and new elevated lines, as well as rehabilitated existing lines. Then they leased them to the private companies for operation. Cost was shared between the city and companies. The single expansion under the dual contracts built a majority of the subway system used today. Despite the successful expansion of the subway, the PSC was still seen as too cumbersome and slow. It was also tasked with the construction of rapid transit and regulating all other public utility corporations within the city. So in 1919, Alfred E. Smith, the governor of New York, argued that these functions had to be separate. He signed legislation to take control of public transit away from the PSC. His new transit construction commissioner appointed a man named Daniel Lawrence Turner as chief engineer. Turner wanted to spread out the city's population across all 5 boroughs. In 1920, he released his ambitious, comprehensive plan. Over 830 miles of new routes, more than double the system's existing mileage, and even more than what's there today, all built within 25 years. But then politics got in the way again. The mayor, John F. Highland, was adamant that the city should own the transit system, not the state and not private companies. He was once fired from the BRT for driving a train at a reckless speed around a curve, so he held a deep-seated grudge against the privately operated subway companies. He wanted to push the IRT and BRT out of business. He withheld funds for new lines, denied building permits, and refused to raise the 5-cent fare, hoping to cut off their revenue. His master plan to destroy the private rail companies was a public subway expansion designed to directly outcompete them. It was ambitious. He would build over 100 miles of new lines and take over another 100 from private companies, all completed within 3 years. But he had an enemy. The State Transit Commission. They laughed at his plan and called it ridiculous. They asked Turner to draft a proposal to build rapid transit in the suburbs and relieve subway overcrowding. The core of their plan centered on 2 loop lines in Lower and Midtown Manhattan. The first loop envisioned connections between the Long Island Railroad in Lower and Midtown Manhattan. A second, larger loop aimed to establish connections to New Jersey commuter lines. Stations within the city would also provide additional rapid transit service to local riders. But Mayor Highland wasn't one to back off. The city took back control of transit oversight and appointed John Delaney as chairman of the new City Board of Transportation. By the end of the year, he put forth the independent city-owned plan. They would build or extend subway routes by 100 miles, 12 in Manhattan, 19 in the Bronx, 17 in Brooklyn, and 52 in Queens. It would run to every borough except Staten Island, but that didn't really matter. Their aim was to provide subway service within a half a mile of everyone's home. The extravagant plan was proposed in 1929, but after the stock market crash, the full plan would never be built. During the Great Depression, the city's money ran out. Mayor LaGuardia united the IRT and BRT into a unified city-run system to save money. Even though there were no funds, the city kept planning for future expansions. In 1939, Delaney unveiled another plan. It included a Second Avenue subway, running from Lower Manhattan into the Bronx. In the Bronx, there would be 3 main expansions. In Queens, the Queens Boulevard and Van Wyck Boulevard lines would be extended. Multiple connections would also be established in Brooklyn. But these plans never moved forward either. World War II diverted resources, and so did a new player. Robert Moses came to power in the 1930s. His massive highway projects were seen as the future. Trolleys, L trains, and subways were the past. He advocated for the demolition of old elevated lines in Manhattan. They were all demolished. All the streetcar tracks were ripped out to make room for cars. Robert Moses was exceptionally good at achieving his own vision. Transit leadership was not. They were unable to raise the 5-cent subway fare until 1948, which meant they had no funding for transit projects. When the city issued bonds in 1951, the revenue was diverted from new line construction to maintain and modernize the existing system. Meanwhile, Robert Moses diverted funds earmarked for a subway extension in the Bronx to build his Belt Parkway project, and he snapped up rights-of-way reserve for rapid transit to build a highway in the Bronx. By the end of his 50-year reign, the city-operated subway was severely underfunded. It had a backlog of deferred maintenance and was unable to complete plans for expansion. The subways were taken from city control and given to the state. The new MTA launched an ambitious proposal called the Program for Action. But just like the Great Depression and World War II halted plans before, another economic crash in the 1970s put a stop to this one too. The subway was transferred to the MTA, but it continued to decline. During the city's fiscal crisis in the 70s, the subways turned into a powerful visual metaphor. By the 90s, the economy and the subway were recovering, but decades of underfunding had taken their toll. More than 100 years later, the New York City subway still has not achieved the grand designs of Turner and Delaney, and unless it can get cheaper to build, it never will.
One of the biggest obstacles of making YouTube videos with Blender animations like this one are the render times. Your GPU gets tied up for hours, sometimes days, just to process every single frame. Superluminal allows you to transfer your Blender project files to our render farm, where multiple GPUs will tackle your render at the same time. There's no way to produce Blender animations as intuitively, fast, and affordably as with Superluminal. The quick and easy submission process and the live web previews ensure you don't have to think about rendering anymore. There's nobody on our team who uses their own GPUs to render our compositions anymore. The opportunity cost of not using Superluminal is way more expensive than using the render farm. Get $10 in credits for free with your first purchase by going to sue.lu/subways, or by using the referral code HOOG.